Just looking out for you.
And who's the lucky winner? So you were that whiz with them. You ever see that movie you just kids and all kinds of Hatchet. I named that fish. I named this big board fish. You were a nice red snapper.
Meeting back to order. We're going to take up item H10. It has to do with the agreement to develop an ambulance plan. We have folks here that traveled away, so we're going to let this one. Eric, are you going to take this?
Yeah, I'll take it. I have Mr. Steve's behind me for support as well, but. What's that? This is Dan Speed with North Carolina. Sorry. Project myself here. Eric with Lassen County Emergency Services Chief, and thank you for the time on this. What I have before you is basically a contract to retain Richard Nerad as a consultant to develop our ambulance operating plan. He developed the original plan back in 2005 that we're currently operating under, and the state PHMSA requires that this plan be reviewed and or put out to bid every 10 years or periodically. So essentially, 2015 is when the current contract expires. And in order to not have a lapse in services, we have to start the discussions now. Mr. Nerad has agreed to do this again for us. He did the original, so he's very familiar with the county and the rural elements that we deal with. So based upon that, the price that he has quoted us is basically half of what it originally cost. Because a lot of the groundwork's already been done. There's been no changes proposed to the current contract or the current structure of the EOA. So with that, I'll take questions, or if you have anything you want to add to what I said. It's pretty much there in front of you. There will be more discussion coming up about this throughout the year as the plan's developed, and there'll be public comment periods, et cetera, with the RFP process and the bidders. Is there any questions from the board on that?
Board members?
Now, is this contract, is this going to cover the new proposed ambulance district that's going to be going up there in the Big Valley area?
No, this is independent. There's two different zones. There's a zone 1 and a zone 2, and this is for zone 1, which is basically Grasshopper South. This butts up against the Cascade or the Southern Cascade district. Those border or overlap slightly right about the Grasshopper area. So it will not encompass that.
Okay.
That was one of my questions, Eric. The second one is, how is the plan that he proposed 10 years ago working now?
To my knowledge, outstanding. I mean, we've had very, very little negative impacts or feedback.
Okay.
SIMS is pleased with the service. They're pleased working with the county. To my knowledge, I think they're going to rebid when it comes up. I don't know of any others that have expressed interest, but then again, we still got another 16 months to go on this process, so that's going to be a fun time for them.
So you said this proposal is considerably less than the initial one?
Yeah, the original looked closer to 80,000 because we were starting from scratch. And this one is, 33,000, so we're, a little less than that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions of the public on this item? Okay, well, thank you.
Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the contract, approve the contract and authorize the chairman to sign.
Okay, thank you. We have a first, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
We have
Sure.
another thought. We have Mr. Spees here, that you didn't give us an update on the Northtown with the issues that they're having with Bob discussed.
Okay.
While we're on kind of on the same topic.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't pick up on the last part of that.
You're here, so I was wondering if you, Bob, he talked to us last week or 2 weeks ago on the NorCal issue with repainting.
Money's out.
California Department.
Oh, with
The money's
CDPH.
out, yeah.
I wonder if you could give us a little update on that.
Yeah, we've been working with the Assembly District representatives. Our approach was that they would have the loudest voice in talking to CDPH, and our motivation is to work out a repayment schedule with them so that we can get this matter taken care of. I think you probably know that the three assemblymen that serve the 6 counties that we have, Assemblyman Chesgrove, Dolly, and Loeb, wrote a joint letter to CDPH. I think it was due to that letter that our council was contacted by counsel for CDPH, and they wanted to know what we would propose as a repayment schedule. We provided them with the financial statement, a letter from our CPA, and a proposed budget that showed the limits of what we would be able to repay them. They wanted an amount on an annual basis that was much more than that. In the meantime, we have had letters from each of our county boards of supervisors encouraging working out a resolution to this. A couple of the health departments from a couple of our counties have written similar letters. Some of our providers have. We're in communication with the assemblyman district representatives, and we hope to be able to sit down with CDPH and work out an arrangement. At this point, we're still working through the district representatives. They can say things that we can't say to the department. So that's where we are right now. I'm looking forward to, as I say, getting this thing in our rear view mirror so we can move forward. But we need to have an audience with CDPH.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, we'll take the vote. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Passes. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, we'll move to item C2, the 10:30 public hearing. Take the sidewalk at 10:32. This is also planning and building services.
Good morning, Chairman Lassen, member of the board. The subject before you this morning is the proposed ordinance revising Title 12 of the Lassen County Code, Chapter 12.26, flood damage prevention. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Malcolm McDonald, the county surveyor with the Planning and Building Services. We request that the board conduct a public hearing, receive recommendation from the Lassen County Planning and Building Services, and to introduce and adopt by title only an ordinance revising Title 12 of the Lassen County Code, Chapter 12.26, flood damage prevention. An audit by the Federal Emergency Management Agency has found Lassen County to be deficient in several areas with its current flood ordinance, and an update is necessary to bring Lassen County into compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. The FEMA has recommended using the current state model for flood prevention and damage, and is detailing substantial damage and improvement procedures. FEMA has reviewed a draft ordinance, and the changes made were sufficient to bring Lassen County into compliance with the NFIP requirements. Take any questions?
Is a copy of the audit in here?
Yes, take the back of the package. Refer to page 33, excuse me. Yes, 33.
So, okay, well, I'll go ahead. Any questions about the board?
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Supervisor Damon?
This document kind of scares me. You know, I don't know where the 100-year floodplain is in our county. I mean, you could say we're in one right here. And to leave it up to a building department official, whether you're in the floodplain or no, kind of worries me. There's several things in here that worry me, Maury, and you can probably address this better than Malcolm.
Well, let's
As a
each elephant one bite at a
floodplain
time.
Huh?
Let's address each one at a time. So
Okay.
the building official is responsible for implementing a map that is generated by FEMA, not by us. So he doesn't just go out willy-nilly and decide who's in a flood zone. So we utilize their GIS layer to identify where the flood zone is,
Okay.
not our building official.
Do we have access to that map?
Certainly it's available at our counter. I don't know if you go to the FEMA website if they have them available or not, but we certainly make them public.
You can download FEMA flood maps from the website.
I'd certainly hate to vote on this until I looked at that map and I knew exactly where we were.
The mark's not in the flood zone.
But maybe my
Well,
house
it's
is,
just
I
not
don't know.
one,
It's a series of
it's a
maps.
series of maps.
I'm quite sure it is, I'm quite sure it is, but I'm sure nobody here knows if their homes are in flood zones or no, and,
Well, if they're paying a mortgage, they probably know.
if they're what?
If they're paying a mortgage, they probably know.
Okay, so we're looking at future development, and, okay, let's take around the Amity Airport. Okay, we're looking at future development there. Is that considered in a flood zone?
You basically, you plug in the coordinates and it comes up on a map, and then that's how you determine if you're within the 100-year or outside the 100-year. And if you are, it's not an end game, right? If you're in a flood zone, it doesn't
Just
mean
gotta
that you
build
can't
up
build.
the pads and
Right,
everything,
I mean,
yeah.
really,
I get
this
that.
document is meant to be a disclosure document, as well as if you're going to construct in a flood zone, you have to do it in a way that doesn't block the flood. So if you're in a flood zone, you build to a different standard, or you elevate the pad to be out of the flood zone.
Is it the south end of town there around Walmart, Safeway and all that?
That's all gonna be a flood zone.
A lot of it is, yeah. But, like I say, Walmart's probably elevated above the flood zone, so there are ways, this is meant to be a disclosure document so that you can do the things that you need to do to either build above it or build in a way that allows free movement of water.
Well, I think one thing that also has to be part of the equation is the validity or accuracy of the maps that are used to make those determinations. And when FEMA launched this program back in the 70s, this has been an evolving type thing. A lot of their early map making was relatively inaccurate. And I know here in the city, dealing with the same issue and dealing with enforcement, some of the maps had the high side of the street and the creek being in the flood zone, and just having the orientation and basically harassing private property owners to obtain, either prevent them from doing what they have been doing or obtain expensive insurance because of some administrative error that was made, back in Washington or wherever the maps were being developed. And that was a very difficult process to try to get some of those maps. And I know the county, when it first had to deal with those, there was kind of an appeal period. And at the time, they didn't, the question was asked, if these are wrong and with the appeal period, if it expires, do we have a chance to fix things later if an error can be identified? And they were assured they could. Well, then those people retire and new people come in and they look at the law and they decide to interpret things differently. So we've had some issues even in unincorporated areas in the past. We're talking about 10, 20, 30 years ago now, in which we've had to, try to go in there and get the process reopened so that we could have the rectification of the errors made by them at the expense of our own people. So
One of my questions was, if the maps are inaccurate, are we held liable since we're the ones that are looking at the map saying, justifying, or, designating if this is a floodplain or no? What kind of liability do we have?
Well, there's two sides to that question. One is if we didn't identify something as flood zone and it was, and then the other is when we identify something and it's not. So the latter is, you'll see in the ordinance, there's provisions to work through that. You can, many cases, like in Moon Valley, the whole thing is basically a flood zone based on the old map. But there are rises and knolls and different places where someone could potentially build. And so in that case, you would work with the county building official as well as somebody like NST to get a flood certification to demonstrate that you're not in the flood zone. And that's frequent, that happens a lot. And yes, the criticism is well taken. It's on the owner to go out and pay for a flood cert to get through that knothole. So, yeah, but there is a procedure. Conversely, I don't know. I yield to county council. We're implementing the federal map, so I don't know that we do take on the liability, but that's for a bunch of lawyers in a room, no offense, to figure out.
And if I may add, individuals can also apply for what they call a LOMA, letter of map amendment to FEMA. It's at no cost to them, other than probably bringing an engineering or a surveying company in to determine their elevation and that such. But usually, I've seen cases here in Lassen County, Tama County, and other counties where the LOMAs have been accepted by FEMA, and it's brought them out of the flood area and it's reduced their insurance premiums.
There still is a cost to the potential applicant. No matter what we say or do, there is a cost.
Just because you have a flood certification that you're out of the 100-year flood, you're not guaranteed you won't get flooded.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. Who determines this 100-year flood and how old are those maps? And
Well, I would say the one
demographics
thing
change, and it scares me to
the
vote
one
on
thing we know
this.
for sure is the maps, the current maps are a heck of a lot better than the old maps.
They've been updated.
they've been updated September 2010.
It's
Okay.
basically a
Okay.
GIS layer now versus just lines on a map that been drawn.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to table this until we get a look at the maps.
Are the maps something that we could,
Probably gonna be looking at 60 maps.
And we can continue the public hearing. It's fine. There's no time constraint other than we should have got this done a year ago, but
so this was brought upon by the,
we had an audit. And the audit, I mean, it is, yes, we're out of compliance, but then again, it's their ordinance that we had, as Mr. Chapman pointed out, it was their ordinance that we were implementing from today. They just want us to be
More up to date.
more up to date. And I'm really recommend that we do that because, like I said, the maps are so much better now.
Supervisor Chapman?
Yes, and I think speaking to that particular issue, this field audit took place on August 28, 2012. And the letter that came from FEMA to the county was dated September 24th, and there was a reply that was made back to FEMA dated October 4th from the CAO at the time. The board was not CC'd. So this, right now, I mean, this week today, I mean, we got our agendas last Thursday, Friday, when they were picking them up or over the weekend. And this is really the first the board has had an opportunity to discuss this. So I guess the question, I know what the answer will be, but I guess the question that needs to be asked is, why is this now coming to the board almost 2 years, 18 months pushing 2 years later for us to take an action? And I think before I feel comfortable voting on this here, I'd like to, I'm reading on page 37, at the bottom of that page, community action meeting, and I'm reading what but I guess they're saying in their letter, this is part of their attachment, talking about Lassen County's ordinance has a few deficiencies that FEMA recommends be corrected. Please see the California state model mentioned above for a template. If the county chooses to update its ordinance, please provide a signed and dated copy to this office upon adoption. So obviously it wasn't anything that they were urgently wanting to see done in late 2012. So I guess maybe we're still functioning well, but I just find it hard to believe that we're 18 months later now at the board level. It'd been nice if we could have had some briefing on this like way back then. Just a comment, I agree with Mr. Hammond that I think I'd like to have more time to review the entire packet and more importantly, look at these updated maps, because I remember some of those early maps I reviewed, I was just amazed. I mean, just here in town, like the intersection of Willow and Park Hill Street, and it's like this. And there's a house sitting here, George Sargent used to live on this house, Pipe Creek comes under the intersection. So everything on the northeast and east of that intersection is probably could be 10 feet below, 5 to 10 feet below the intersection. And the guy living on the uphill side, his house is built up on a mound even, is probably a good 10 feet, that's where John Doyle used to live, good 10 feet above the intersection. And they dogged him for flood insurance. And sure, maybe he needed to have flood insurance, I guess, if something blocked up and backed up. But before his house would see any water coming in the front door, about 2/3 of Susanville would be under anywhere from 2 to 10 feet of water. So I'm not saying that maybe that can't happen.
Yeah.
That just shows you how crazy, and they just took the creek and they just drew lines like this around the creek. And his house happened to be included. I remember seeing or listening to that discussion over at City Hall, thinking like, these guys don't have, their elevator doesn't go to the top.
Chairman Lussick, I want to remind the board that the city is not included in this ordinance.
No, I realize that.
Okay.
But I use that as an example, because if it could happen inside the city that way, believe me, you got 4,500 square miles out there, that could easily be the case too.
And FEMA has downgraded all levies, and they don't take a road base or a base road as a dam or any beach. They will continue that flood elevation through the road next time, so.
So in short, we're happy to continue the public hearing so that people can review the maps. And as an explanation, not an excuse, in the 18 months we've been without a floodplain administrator. During that period, we've gone to several trainings to get up to speed on what's being asked of us and make sure we're comfortable coming forward even in the absence still of an official floodplain administrator.
And comments back from FEMA, Ms. Sarah Owen, she only had two comments regarding a couple of typographical errors, numerical errors in the thing, and then her last thing was, otherwise it looks great, and thanks again for your efforts. Please send a copy with the dates and signature for our files and when the ordinance is complete.
Yeah, I mean, I served on the planning commission, so I know all about these floodplains and how they're gerrymandered here and there and et cetera. And I think the easiest way to explain this for everybody is they're meant to protect individuals. So that'd be somebody, say like Maria, who come up here from the Bay Area that wanted to took the job in Lassen County. Honey Lake's been dry for 2-3 years. Somebody sells her 100 acres out there, she builds her house out in the middle of Honey Lake. Where is she then? Who does she have to go back on? Nobody. I mean, that's what this floodplain is for. Designation is to protect people like that. And that's basically what the gist of it is.
And that's a good analogy, and you can maybe laugh and think that sounds kind of absurd. Back in, it was either in the early 90s or sometime in the 80s when Honey Lake was dry, there was a guy that came in and he was serious about subdividing in the middle of the lake and figured if the water came back, it'd be our job to keep the water out. There's subdivision we didn't get it.
No, we have a picture of somebody that, without a permit, decided to build a home in, up in Madeline Plains, and there's about 4 feet of water. Looks like Noah's Ark.
But my other question is, Marty, I mean, in here you don't have any additions or changes, there's nothing to delineate what changes you made.
Yeah, and if we continue the public hearing, we can, Malcolm and I can come back and sort of poke out the differences between the old FEMA ordinance and the new one.
Okay, that's what I'd be more interested in your map. personally.
Yes, bringing this into the NFIP requirements puts the county at a lower rate, and as such, so the community adopting the ordinance brings into NFIP requirements, and gives us a lower tax or insurance rate for the members of the county.
So what is the rate difference? I mean,
You know, I don't know,
is it substantial or minimal?
yes.
It'd be nice to get that quantified so we can have further justification.
So is it the,
Thank you.
okay, any questions of the audience on the president?
Iona McCain. There's other forensic sites in his teeth that does water certification for floodplains called McCain Associates, still in here and I'm surveying. We've dealt with that issue, and what happens is that when you want to refinance your house or something like that, the mortgage companies are requiring you to get the FEMA floodplain. And generally, you have a surveyor go out and locate the elevations and tell you where the 100-year storm is, located in the floodplain. So I would like to state that I think it's a serious thing, that I don't think it's necessarily a governmental thing that you should be forced to do this, because it'll make every person who sells their house, the Department of Planning will make them get a FEMA permit, which means more money for the person that is selling the house. And I think it should be left up to the individual mortgage companies and the person that is doing the business there. It's a serious thing. They're doing this to Eagle Lake. Not Eagle Lake, but Lake Almanor. A lot of my friends that have homes up there from Chico are forcing, if they want to do anything with their house or build anything with their house, what do you think they have to do? If they have to get the 100-year floodplain certification. So I think I ought to leave it up there and don't let the government force another fee onto the individual. Thank you.
Can I throw in 2 cents?
Yes, sir.
Gary Felt. I still own a house on Washington, happens to be in a floodplain, a designated floodplain. Just for interest, I think it's great the board's considering doing a little more research so you guys understand it better. I pay about $2,000 a year for my flood insurance on my house up there. A few years back, 7 years ago or so, they had a 100-year flood. My house did not flood. I happen to live on the waterfront property, and the entire Puget Sound did have to go up a few feet, and it doesn't happen from a rainstorm. It's more creeks, streams, ponds, things like that. So I think it's great that the board is going to look at it a little bit closer, and you know what latitudes you have. And like she was saying, it's really a mortgage requirement. In order to have my mortgage, I had to have flood insurance, but it's a significant cost. And if I were to rebuild, I'd get into what we're really talking about, which is a county ordinance. If I wanted to rebuild on that house or do some improvements to get my building permit, they'd say, oh, you're in a floodplain, you need to spend so much more money to raise it up. And like I said, I went through a 100-year flood and I didn't flood. And I'm not that far from where that mudslide was here recently. But my property didn't flood, but I'm paying the flood insurance, even though really, the government's bed say I'm inside the 100-year floodplain, but we had a 100-year flood and it didn't flood.
You're in the 112 years.
Oh, yeah, this is by that much. Yeah. So I think I applaud the board for saying, hey, let's look at it a little closer, let's make sure we're doing the right thing before we just need an administrator.
But that shows you the accuracy in their maps.
Yeah.
And I think that to me has always been the issue with that.
I could see where the floods were, but they didn't flood my house. So,
Yeah.
but they look kind of a large scale. Like you said, outline the creek. In this case, they outlined Puget Sound and said if you're in so many feet from shore, you must flood.
Oh, you missed it by 12 years, thank you.
This is my 12 years, thank goodness. Thank you.
Sell that house quick.
I might. I'm working on it.
So is it the direction of the board that will continue this?
Yes.
Do we have a date, or will we just show up again?
Why don't we just forward it to the next meeting?
And what additional?
Why don't we give ourselves a couple weeks?
Yeah, let's not,
Well, it's pretty much next week or next month, because the 22nd is
The joint
Beaver
board
and the
meeting.
29th is Squat County, so
May would be fine.
May's good. First
that'll
meeting
give
is-
us time to look at the maps.
Just so we know, so what other information will be included?
What I heard is you want to know the difference between the new one and the old one. You want to review the maps, and I think those are the two main components.
The insurance. More how's
The difference between being
How's that review gonna happen?
The insurance,
the review the maps.
saves you.
Well, it's upon the supervisors to review, and then when we give our next presentation, we can use a PowerPoint presentation to kind of float around and.
Would we be able to like come to your office at some point between now and then and maybe look at the maps that way? I think that
You can
might
look
be-
at them on the screen, and we can print out. Yeah, we can print out anything you want.
color or black and white.
Okay? Did I cover it?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The county's probably about 90% in one zone, Zone A. There's very limited study areas in the county, so, which determines that 100-year PFE.
So Richard, are we gonna refer back to this? Should we just all hang on to this and bring it back?
That'd be best, it
We
would
don't
save
have
us.
to-
I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna stick it right here, that way it's ready.
Save a tree or so.
Okay, so we'll close this item at 10:55. And actually, we're gonna continue it. This item, yeah.
First meeting.
Yeah, we'll take it up again. Close it for today. Let's quickly do unagendized board reports. I'll, hopefully this will go good. I'll begin, I have nothing to report. Okay, moving right along.
I attended Brian Daly's fundraiser in Sierra Valley, and I met some of our co-conspirators from Sierra Valley, 3 of the Board of Supervisors, which was a very interesting dynamic. They face a lot of things.